Today I'm making pupusas with curtido and salsa. It's gonna be good. Today I'm going to make pupusas and I'm going to start by creating the filling for them. So here I have 1 pound of semi-soft white melting cheese. You could use the cheese of your choice like Monterey Jack or mozzarella. This type of cheese I purchased from my Latin market and it's specifically made for pupusas. I'm just going to grate it or blend it up until it's broken down. You could also shred this with a box grater. And now my cheese is ready. Now I am going to be making pupusas with queso y loroco, which is a green unopened flower bud. And the best way to describe the smell and taste is like a cross between broccolini and squash. Okay, so once that's broken down, I'm going to add that to the cheese. By the way, I will be putting the measurements and ingredients in the description below. I'm using around 5 to 6 ounces of Loroco. Okay, so now my filling is ready, but sometimes I like to use a bean and cheese filling, so I'll show you how I make that. So here I have some leftover black beans, but I have probably 1.5 to 2 cups of beans. I'm going to use half of this onion. Well, actually, this is half of an onion, so I'm going to use this half of onion. This is a 1/4 section of a fresh green bell pepper and 1 small Roma tomato. I'm going to chop that up and puree it all together with the beans, and then I'm going to cook out the moisture and create basically a bean paste. I've already chopped my tomato, bell pepper, and onion. It's going right in. So now I'm going to add my black beans. By the way, if you've got red beans, pinto beans, use what you have. I have a lot of black beans. And because I don't have a lot of liquid, I'm going to add just 1/4 cup of water to this. You could also add chicken broth. Okay, now give it a pulse. Okay, so I have my pan preheating over medium heat. I'm going to add 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil. Maybe just 2 tablespoons would have worked. And now I'm going to pour in my bean puree. Salt to taste. If you want to add some dried spices or seasonings. So black beans, I don't think are a traditional or authentic filling for pupusas. Maybe something like red bean, a certain type of bean, but I'm sorry, I like pupusas and I like to fill them with what I've got in the kitchen. Okay, so my beans are done. I'm going to shut off the heat and I'm going to allow them to cool completely. Now that my beans are completely cooled, I'm going to add shredded cheese. This is a 10 ounce, well, not a block, but a ball, but it was 10 ounces of Oaxaca cheese that I grated. You could use mozzarella, low moisture mozzarella. Use what you have. Sometimes I just use whatever shredded cheese I have in the fridge. Now I'm just going to give this a mix. And this is the bean and cheese filling for my pupusas. On to the masa dough. Here I have 4 cups of instant corn flour for masa. I've added 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to give that a mix. I will link the type of instant corn flour I'm using below. Little by little, I'm going to add warm water. Ultimately, it's going to sort of be equal parts water to maseca, or today I'm using Bob Mills instant corn flour for masa. And what you'll want to end up with is a soft dough that squishes easily through your hands. And keep water on the side because as you work with the dough to create your pupusas, it does dry out. So I'm going to dip my hands in this water oil mixture. This makes it a lot easier to handle the dough. And I'm just going to grab some dough, create a ball, and press it into a disc. And now I'm going to fill it in the center and sort of enclose it with the dough. And then I'm just going to flatten it carefully and sort of press it between my hands until I get a flat circular disc. And that's it. Now, this does take practice. I'm gonna make sure my edges are okay. And a good indication that your masa is the right consistency is when it doesn't crack. So as I worked with it, it does dry out, so I'm adding a little more water because once the dough sort of cracks, that means it's too dry. I'm using a spoon this time, it makes it a lot easier, and you could add a little bit of water to your filling to make it more paste-like, but I just went with what I had. So I'm going to enclose it again, tear off any excess dough, and just press it between your hands until you have a flattened circular disc, and repeat the process. And I am placing them on a baking sheet lined with wax paper. It makes it a lot easier to pick up later. So my griddle is preheated to around 325 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to start cooking these. Now this process is not quick because the masa dough does take time to cook all the way through. So on each side, I'm going to cook it roughly around 5 to 6 minutes and then flip it again. And you just want to make sure that the dough cooks through. So it's going to take a good 12 minutes. And you could use a spatula to flip it. You don't have to use your hands. I'm just used to doing this. And I'm just going to continue cooking until they are cooked through. So while these cook, I want to show you how I created the salsa for pupusas. So here in a medium to large size pot, by the way, I like using my ramen noodle pot, I've added 6 Roma tomatoes. I'm going to add 1 large red bell pepper, 1 jalapeno, half of a small onion, and 1 large clove of garlic is going in. You could also use green bell pepper and skip the jalapeno. Here I have 1 small carrot that I roughly chopped into slices, and I'm just going to bring that to a boil. Once it starts to boil, I'll let it go for about 5 to 7 minutes. At this point, I shut off the heat and I'm going to remove the tomato skin, and I'm placing everything in my blender cup. I'm also going to add around a 1/3 cup of the boiling liquid. I'm also adding 1 tablespoon of chicken bouillon powder, or you could skip that if you don't like it and just add salt to taste. Now I'm going to puree well. Once pureed, I'm going to add it to a preheated pot, the same pot, with 2 tablespoons of cooking oil, and I'm just going to bring that to a simmer. And let that simmer for around 10 minutes or so. I'm adding salt to taste. Again, adjust the seasonings and salt to your preference, and that's the salsa. It's really easy and delicious. Now on to the curtido, and if you want the full detailed recipe video, I will link that below. Okay. So for the pickling liquid, I am going to bring 2 cups of water to a boil. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of salt, and I'm just going to mix the salt, combine it with the water until it dissolves. Now that the water is boiling, I'm going to shut off the heat, and I'm going to add 2/3 cup of white distilled vinegar. If you have apple cider vinegar, I use that sometimes. It just depends what you have. Now, if you can get your hands on pineapple vinegar, that works as well. Okay. So my cabbage is thinly shredded, and I gave it a really good rinse in cold water and drained the water. Thinly sliced onion, I'm going to add that. I probably should have used a larger bowl. 2 shredded carrots going in. And I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of Mexican oregano right in. And you could pre-mix it. I'm just going to go for it and pour my hot liquid, pickling liquid, all over the ingredients. Okay, so this is combined and mixed, and as it sets, that salted pickling brine is going to draw out even more moisture from the ingredients, so there will be more liquid that collects into this bowl. I'm just going to cover it with a lid and just let it hang out on the counter for about an hour or so, and then I'll put it in the refrigerator to store for later use. And to make this spicy, you could also add 1 jalapeno or serrano pepper, pierce it, and add it right into your curtido, and that will give you, a spicier option. And for best results, you probably want to make this a day or 2 ahead of time before you eat it. And it stores in your refrigerator. I have actually stored curtido, a batch just like this, for about a month and a half without any issue. But it also depends how much you eat it. I actually will eat this with pupusas. I'll eat it on tacos, tostadas. I love this as a side dish for a lot of things that I make. So my first batch of pupusas are ready, and it's time to dig in. So I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching!